Hey, how's it going, everyone? We are back with another Build BeautieZ today. Now I have a very special guest. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey, everybody, I'm Nate Brown from North Carolina. You guys probably don't know me outside of the East Coast crew, Kelly, Kevin, Shane, um, those guys. But Frank was nice enough to let me come on here and show off a deck that I have really enjoyed. So I appreciate him having me, and hope somebody out there might try out the deck and enjoy it a little bit.
Yeah. So I had seen you posting about this deck. I mean, we were just talking about it, but I had seen you posting about this deck every once in a while. And it is Oppressive Premier Trunks, and it's all Premier levels. So what the?
Well, yeah, actually, the four is the evolution four.
Oh, it is the evolution. Oh, yep, you're right. Sorry, it's got that promo art on it. So what's the reasoning behind this deck here? Why the Premier stack?
Well, I kind of fell in love with Premier Trunks back when the game first started because I've always, back to the score days, always been a Saiyan player. And in the beginning, it was rough for physical beats in general, but I felt like Trunks, even though he powers were even kind of crappy back in set one, he was the only one that could really contend because he was the only Saiyan that could push a high power level at the start of the game. So I played him a lot early on in the game and kind of just got nostalgia one day and I was like, I want to see if I can make him work. And then I was like, how can I use this kind of garbage, scrying power? And then I realized I was like, well, if I pair him with oppressive, it allows me the oppressive draw to not be as blind. And that's kind of the idea I started with. And then as I started, I kind of realized there's some really neat synergies and some really cool combos you can pull off with that ability combined with the oppressive and some of the more recent additions to the card pool.
Hmm. Yeah, I was gonna say getting to set up what you draw could be pretty good. I think it's interesting because Scry in a lot of other games I've been playing in Magic over I was playing over quarantine stuff. I got into it, and Scry is actually like really powerful. But in this game, it kind of feels like there there's really not much of it. I think there's like a Villain 18 level 2 from Fanzy, and then Premier Trunks are like the only people that scry at all. But we don't ever see them played.
Well, yeah, and one of the tough things is with the trunk stack is that if you're not playing oppressive mastery, it's going to be a very weak power on as the aggressor because you can look at the card, but you can't really do anything with it. So it's not bad on defense. You get to pick your three out of your best top four, so you get one extra card to kind of play with. But on the offensive end, by the time you've entered, your hand's already set. But not with oppressive. So that's kind of the synergy I was leaning into to try and make that scry more worth it.
Yeah. No, I like it. Um, so we literally just loaded up this deck, and I've only taken a brief look over it. But let's go through the attacks here. You run a fair amount of energy attacks in this deck. One of which being assisted Kamehameha, and you don't have any life card modifiers on it. Why do you run assisted Kamehameha?
Yeah, so I that's kind of a it's a I guess what I'd say is a surprise card. So this deck rushes to four, and I've been fairly consistent getting there. I've had some games where I don't make it, but usually you can win the game on three.
Yeah.
But your goal is to get to four, and a lot of times you'll get to four, and you'll have either you can make the say and forceful stop active, or maybe you have tree on, and then all of a sudden that AK is hitting for four life cards and five stages, unstoppable and preventable. If you got any mods from forceful stop or if you got tree on, that can be a significant chunk of damage. And it's also really nice because it can end up stage locking somebody when they're not prepared for it. They might be holding a block and think that they're safe, able to throw another attack, and then all of a sudden they take 5 or 7 stages from a assisted Kamehameha. And if they're locked already, which if you're on Trunks 4, it's not too hard to do. It's going to be 9 unpreventable at minimum. So that's kind of why I slotted it in there.
Hmm.
Also, this deck can function as a typical oppressive deck where you get in and throw some attacks and then end combat. If you don't get the draws that you expect, or you don't set, you scry and you don't see what you need. There's a lot of ways to mitigate that by dipping in and out of combat. So, there's going to be some times where, you can enter with the Saiyan sword skill on and throw the Kamehameha, make them skip, and then get out of combat.
That's true.
Um,
That is true, actually. Huh. Yeah, that's kind of neat. That's actually pretty neat that it not being a crit attack. Interesting. Uh, so we'll keep going through here. Of course, you got the two blinding, like you're talking about. You said the
yeah, just your typical combat ending, if you need it. And the nice thing is you can run a fair amount of cards in this deck that you may not want to play, because a lot of times you can just dump them off. You have a lot of ways to dump cards out to get other cards, which I kind of moved through them here. So if that's what you want me to do.
Yeah, go
Um,
ahead if you want to keep going through the
okay.
energy
So
text
then,
here.
we've got the chest blast here. I mean, that should be fairly obvious that, with oppressive, it's really nice because you can essentially get two back-to-back skips if you're the aggressor. But what was especially nice with this deck is you have a couple of different options that you can do. Once you're on, well, I guess you could actually even do this on levels 1 or 2 if you're entering combat, but
Yep.
you can see what you're going to draw with the chest blast and actually reorganize it. So, if you got a turn where you enter combat, you get to look at your top 4. You may even find the chest blast there. You can move it to the top, draw and move the card you want to draw off of it underneath it. Draw the chest blast with oppressive, and then once it hits, you know exactly what you're going to draw. So that becomes pretty good. The other option is once you're on 2 or 3, if you already have chest blast in hand, you can take a peek at your opponent's cards and make sure they don't have an energy block, so you know it's going to be live. So there's a couple of different ways you can do that. I found the most success with it to be planting a card that I plan to draw with it on my second action, and that works out pretty nicely. And then of course, if they block it, you don't get the card, but it's
Yeah.
still a threatening way to threaten something that, or to draw an extra card you might need.
No.
And then of course we have the. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to go on to the tracking blast. So if you want to say anything about the chest blast, I'm sorry to cut you off.
Oh no, I was just gonna say yeah. Between the level 1 and like this, I mean, you can draw essentially two of the top 2 cards of your deck. That's actually pretty cool. Like especially when you get to set it up yourself. I mean, that's pretty good. I really like that. I really like the scry with that. That's pretty cool. With all the
And
skipping.
then, oh yeah, yeah, you get the skip. And so, the nice thing is a lot of times you can enter, throw one attack, make them skip, throw the chest blast, hopefully draw a card, and they skip, and then you get to go again immediately. I mean, it can really, this deck has a lot of combo potential. I guess the tracking blast is just standard. This deck runs 6 auto levelers, so obviously we want the tracking blast so that we don't get dropped. Um, and then the charged kick. So charged kick is a fringe card that I'm always considering dumping for something else. And if somebody ever wanted to try this deck out and thought that I'm crazy for running charge kick, I totally wouldn't wouldn't fight you on that. But I have a thing where I just kind of like to take cards that are not really expected or don't see a lot of play and try to make them work. And charge kick can actually be fairly decent. It's another, since you're looking at the top cards of your deck, it can allow you to pitch a dead card to draw something. And since you know what you're going to draw most of the time in this deck, that can be pretty nice. And then the other thing is, if you're on level 4, and the opponent isn't stage locked, and this hits, it just straight up draws you a card.
Yeah.
So that can be pretty nice. I mean, it can come in for 5 life and 5 stages and draw you a card. So I've, like I said, I'm not gonna try and argue to somebody that this is the best card in the deck, or that like you can't play this deck without this card. But I just wanted to try and make it work.
I
And yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I love it. I love the idea of, again, it's kind of the same vein as Chest Blast. You get to set up what you're going to draw. You can with this card you can filter your hand, which, at worst, but also, yeah, it does have some fun synergy with your level 4 even. So it's got a couple avenues of utility in this deck. I like it. I like it. I always look at this card and I want to run it at something. So this is like in Trunks the evolution for it you're running is like the one card that I'm like, oh, wouldn't it be cool to run this card? And every once in a while I think of like Clenched Turles too, and I'm like, Clenched Turles is never gonna get this doing enough to get the draw. And I
Yeah,
run,
it's hard to get
but
5 stages.
yeah, that's cool.
And it has some nice synergy with the inspection drill too.
Yep.
You know, so there's always that. I guess we'll move down to physical attacks now. So you have the Trunks to Slam. It's pretty standard. It can be a 2 anger card if it's the first card you play. And then of course it can help you get out of combat if you're in a bad combat or you just want to do a hit and run type deal. So I mean, nothing in this deck outside of the ordinary that you would play Trunk Slam for. Knee Bash is pretty much essential. Just the board is the only board hate this deck has. And of course, the synergy with the aggressive sword drills is nice to be able to pull it whenever you need it. The only bad thing I'll say about this is it stinks to have this card if your opponent's not playing board, because a lot of times you're going to have an attached card on, and you can
You have
have
to
to
banish
banish
it.
your own attached card.
Yeah.
But there's also a lot of ways to make this card become a different card with the oppressive mastery or the charge kick. There's a lot of ways to filter your hand out. So I've actually found myself sometimes with the aggressive sword drill, I'll just grab a card I don't need just so I can pitch it to the oppressive mastery.
Oh yeah.
So it can, it's a great card, but there are going to be times where you're like, I really don't want to banish my own tree or banish my sword skill or whatever. And then we come to sword strike, just another target for the aggressive sword drill, and it can be really really devastating if your opponent has passed. So just kind of standard fare there. Heroic dashing punch is just too good in this deck not to run. It gets you the skip, it gets you anger. It's anger hate, which is something this deck is fairly lacking in. Which I will say, when I built this deck, I kind of built it just to have fun. And if I was going to play it in an actual tournament, which I wouldn't be opposed to, I feel like it can compete a little bit. I would probably tech some of these cards out for some more tech cards, especially like anger, hate, some other things. But right now I'm just having fun with it, so it
No,
is what it is. But
totally
but
fair.
the dashing punch can be pretty invaluable if it connects. And even if it doesn't, you still get the skip and
It's two. I mean, at worst, it's a 2 anger card. I mean, if you're playing Hero Oppressive, it's really hard to not run this card. I don't really know any Hero Oppressive decks that wouldn't run Dashing Punch. So,
yeah.
but
It'd probably be kind of crazy not to. So then we have dig, which I do find myself using the leveling effect fairly often, more often than not. If you can get up to your higher levels, you can usually. I mean, obviously you don't want to level like a MPPV deck or something, but I've also noticed, and I don't know if anybody else feels this way, but I felt like leveling your opponent has started to become more valuable in this game. You start to see stuff like enhanced Broly that wants to sit on 2, or some other decks that like build a big board of drills, combative if they don't happen to have conference drill out.
oh
Now
yeah,
of course that may change with the Goku coming out that is gonna nullify drills leaving play when he levels, but I have found that a lot of times leveling someone can be pretty beneficial. Um, but I don't know. I don't always play against meta stuff. A lot of people that I play against like to play these camping decks that build a big board, and sometimes it's worth it to
bump
just
them.
get rid of their drills.
Yeah, I've always found, man, I've always found if like any aggro deck, like it's hard to not run dig because of that bump. Actually, like people talk about the unpreventable part, but bumping like like back when Supreme Card was super popular, bumping a Supreme Card level 2 could completely like throw off his game plan a bit. Like he still had Kibito and stuff, to goof around with it, but he didn't get that set up to the draw card, or didn't get the shuffle key cards in. Same thing with you're saying the combative decks, like the combative trunks with the vengeance one. Yeah, you don't get screwed by it. He doesn't get screwed by it really, but there's all these decks that do camp, especially in like black, and like you're saying, Hans Broly even. He does have some tools to stop you from doing that, but bumping those decks can definitely be a lifesaver. So definitely for that reason, I actually like it's. I always think about that anytime I build a deck. I have to be like, how do I beat a camp deck? Do I have to run a bunch of board, or am I going to run dig? So
Yeah.
so it kind of helps you get around the lack of board hate almost.
It does, and having one combat with this deck where you can get some big damage off with dig, and of course maybe that's true about all aggro decks, but this deck, as we'll get into here in just a little bit, can really get some really ludicrous hand advantage. Um, so a dig can be a death sentence sometimes, whereas normally decks that pack some big endurance would be able to maybe weather your kill turn. But if you have dig, and another thing, to consider with the way this deck works is you draw through a lot of cards, which allows you to find a lot of what you need. So that's dig is just, I mean, it's just a great card. If you're playing aggro, you're probably running dig. Um, but anyways, so then we'll go on to dashing sword. Everybody knows what dashing sword is about. One thing that's nice, is that even though it costs stages, a lot of times you can afford to use your skip to gain stages in this deck. Because I will say one weakness of the deck is it doesn't have a lot of raw anger. So if you're not seeing your auto levelers, it's going to be rather difficult to climb because other than dashing punch and slam, you don't really have a lot of anger gain here other than the skipping. So a lot of times you'll know going into a combat whether or not you're going to be able to level, and so you can use your oppressive to gain stages and make sure you can throw the dashing sword, or later when we look at these saying elbow drops. But it's got the immediate stage loss, which is nice, and then it has a little bit of anger hate, which is pretty nice. And then if it hits, we get another card in hand, so that's pretty solid. One of the weaknesses I feel like when I play dashing sword is that early game a lot of times it's not super great, because you might not have a card in your discard. But oppressive kind of helps you rectify that too, because if you see one of your many sword cards, and you've got dashing sword coming up, you can draw and then dump your other sword card so that your dashing is live, which is pretty nice combo.
Oh, for sure. Of course, you get your final couple attacks. Gut kick just kind of makes sense. Oppressive stage beats
Yep.
is always going to run that card. But then, you only run 2 body blow. I guess you don't really have too many attached cards in this deck. I think I only see 3 attached cards in the whole deck.
Yep. Just 3. And
Yeah.
body blow is another card that it could go or stay. But it is nice to have, especially because you can play it as your first action to skip and get some extra mods for the rest of the turn. So it's pretty nice. I kind of it. The thing is, like, you got the tree and the sword skill and the tracking blast, and a lot of times find myself making the safe play and grabbing the tracking blast. But if you want to go for broke and try and get the tree and then get the sword drill next turn, you can really start to snowball a lot. So I like having the 2 body blow. I don't know that it'd really bump it up to 3, but I could also see it being a card that I would cut if if I needed some more tech.
And elbow drop. Nobody ever runs this card anymore.
Yeah, no, they don't. I feel like I can run it and get away with running it in oppressive because you
So,
can throw it and gain the stages and then throw it again before you can get locked. Because I feel like it's still it's a double attack, and
it's not
especially
bad.
if you're, yeah, and especially if you can make it to 4, and it's hitting really really hard and going twice, and like I said, especially once you do get to your higher levels, you're pretty much always going to be using the skip to gain stages. So it's not like you're not going to be able to throw it,
Yeah.
which is really, I think, kind of why people have gravitated away from running it. Because a lot of times physical decks, kind of surprisingly, are vulnerable to getting stage locked.
Yeah, they're usually just going for just a multitude of attacks, and they're just trying to like level naturally to make up for maybe
Mhm.
getting hit for stage damage. So
So,
no.
what do you want to go into next over here?
Uh well, before we get move on to attacks, I was just gonna maybe state two things. Of one of
Yeah, go
which,
ahead.
so you're saying there's cards that maybe you would work in, like Sane Legendary Strike, for example, and Sane Severing Punch not being in here as a physical aggro deck is just wild to me. And then, and then also, I don't really like this card personally, but Saiyan Slap, I know DDA will live by that card's like utility because you get the Rejuve 3 sword, but you don't really run that much sword, and you're not really trying to be a sword deck, so that card not being in here is fine. But like Severing Punch and like, I already forgot the first one I said. Why now I'm just spacing on the name of it. Legendary Strike, just for the anger hate. Interesting.
Yeah, so those are cards that I actually had in the build originally. But as I started cutting down cards, I just went with what I enjoyed personally more. I mean, I definitely think, dropping charged kick and body blow and maybe even elbow, some combination of charge kick, body blow, and elbow drop for those cards would probably, be a better competitively. Um, but I when I built this deck, I didn't really have any plans to play it tourney, so I was just playing some cards that I personally liked.
No, I think well,
So
I
I
think
went,
I think they all make sense. I think they all synergize well with the deck. So I don't think you're the wrong choice. This is just there's certain cards that you always like. I'm gonna put these in every deck, and that's just kind of how those
yeah.
cards went for me. So
Well, and like I said, I did have them in the original. Like usually, I'll throw all the cards I want into a deck, into the builder, and then just kind of prune it away as I see fit. But I just couldn't resist playing. I wanted to play the charge kick to see if I could make that card work, and then elbow drop's an old favorite, so I chose to go with what I would consider more fun over I think what would be a more utility.
mm,
Because yeah, the deck doesn't have a lot of anger hate. Legendary Strike would be great. Plus, it would add some endurance to the deck, and kind of same with Severing Punch. Um, so I definitely think if you were gonna say, hey, I want to make this deck as good as it can be, that those would probably be better choices. But
well, I think I'll say this though, as far as running the anger hate board hate goes. I mean, the big thing is you have a bunch of skip attacks, right? And if you're on 4, the idea is that all you need to do is just land one combat of continuous skips on somebody. You could kill them. So
yep,
at the same time, it's like you're ideally going to enter on somebody and just hit them a bunch. Okay, now they can make actions and they're going to level, right? So
yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, there's almost not the need for the anger hate if you just already put your attacks through. It's like, okay, go ahead, level. I'm just going to knock you to 0 next turn anyway, and then do the same
yeah.
thing. So,
And I will say there has been times where that has happened. Somebody's leveled and then they eat another big attack immediately. Especially once you get tree on. If you're on 4 with tree and everything's doing minimum 7 stages, um, that leveling isn't that much of a big deal anymore.
no, no, for sure.
But but yeah, I would definitely agree with you that Severing Punch and Legendary Strike probably would make the deck stronger overall. Just I don't think it would be as fun.
I mean, I don't even necessarily know that. Like I said, I don't know if they'd make it stronger. The cards that you would cut for them already have plenty of synergy and utility in the deck. So it's just that's what I like about doing these. Is it's just like I'll present this, but then I absolutely see why they're not in there because I don't think that they need to be necessarily. I think every so far what I've seen with your text, everything makes a lot of sense. I think you've done a really great job of explaining it all. Wow,
Oh,
the
well,
utility of every
thank you.
of every card. No, seriously, I like this deck. I like that it's like I said. I like seeing a lot of the cards that you're running so far. So, but all right, we'll move on to the events here. So you only run 7 events, and of course you run Unleashed, Sword Skill, and Sword Stance. I think you just
Yeah,
have. I love Sword Stance. It's such a cool card.
I was gonna say I think that's probably the only one we need to really go over. I mean,
Yeah.
everybody understands the others, but yeah. So Sword Stance. I looked at this card and I was like, man, if only this card replaced itself. Um, but then I started really thinking about it, and I'm like, really, the only time it doesn't is when you go from 1 to 2, because you can chain your when entering powers.
Mm.
So once you go from 2 to 3, you can activate your level 3 power and draw another card out of your, the best card out of your next 6. And so it kind of does replace itself at that
It's
point.
an effective neutral. Yeah.
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 And then, especially, you can pull this with Sword Drill and, use it
I always forget that.
immediately.
Oh my gosh, it's been so long since I've seen Sword Stance in a deck. I'm completely forgetting you can tutor with aggressive sword drill and then just bop bop.
Yeah, and it's not with how much you scry, and because it gives you it has a lot of utility too, because it gives you the option to shuffle. So you look at your cards, with trunks, and then like if you don't like what you see, once you activate the sword stance, you can just shuffle them away. You'll go up a level, and you can look again. So that's really nice. And it's not uncommon to play for me with this deck to play 2 of these in one turn.
Oh yeah,
Um,
oh yeah,
and so all of a sudden, and it does a good job of catching people off guard too, because you're sitting on level 1 and they enter on you, and next thing you know that you're level 3, or you're sitting on 2 and the next thing you're level 4. And it can really really catch people off guard. I was playing a game with I believe it was Kevin. I can't remember if it was Kevin or Kelly. It's been a few months. But we were playing a game and he entered on me, and uh, I, I pulled the card out to level, and he was like, "Well, I'm gonna comfort." I'm like, "No, no, this is before combat." And he was like, "Oh." So I don't think we ended up finishing that game because he had to go to bed or something. But it catches people off guard that because nobody sees this card.
yeah.
Nobody plays it. So
I forgot it could
um,
shuffle the deck. I mean, I just remember it being like you reveal top card of your deck level. I forgot it shuffle because that's the thing. That shuffle is actually really really good with this deck. I think it's extra good with this deck because you can set up that draw even more with
yeah, yeah, you
with the
get to
master.
scry and then level and shuffle and then scry again. So and being able to search it with aggressive sword, that way it's not actually taking a card out of your hand. And actually, if you're on 2 and you search this card with aggressive sword and go to 3, you actually still come out with a +1, because of the level 3 power. So it's really not as detrimental. The only time it's really bad is if you go from 1 to 2 with it, because then you are down a card, which isn't great.
Yeah,
But you have so many ways to get out of combat too that a lot of times you can have this and a blinding,
or,
or Trunks' slam,
or
and
time or whatever.
yeah, yeah, there's just a lot of ways, or a ball 7, and you can just go up a level and then get out of combat.
Yeah,
So that's nice too. But yeah, there's a lot of neat things you can pull off. So then I guess we've got ball 7, which is just there for combat ending. So I guess we can move on to the blocks, unless you want to go anything. I'm sorry if I'm cutting you off from saying something you
oh
want to
no,
say.
you're all good. Let's talk about the blocks because I do have maybe a comment about the blocks.
All right. So I've got on the move. Obviously, the synergy with setting up your draws is really nice to know what you're going to draw with that on the move, more often than not. And of course, it's especially good with Oppressive because, a lot of times you can force an attack back to hand, skip them a couple of times, and then get out of combat. So it doesn't really matter that the card goes back to hand. And I've seen a lot of people that I shouldn't say a lot of people, but some people I know have kind of criticized on the move because they don't like that you get your immediate effects twice. But man, I've just found so many times where this card has saved me, or been really powerful. I pretty much can't imagine not or building a deck without it. And especially, I'm not a hugest fan of saying outrage. Especially since you're running premier stack trunks, a lot of times you're not going to be a higher power level, um, than some of the newer MPs. So outrage just doesn't usually work out for me. So I'd rather have on the move.
Yeah, so that was one thing I was gonna say. It's no outrage, but I'm like, on the move has that draw synergy. I mean, you can set up what you're going to draw, and you have all these. You have chest blast and charge kick and well, those are the main two drawers here. But like oh, actually, in Sword Skill, for what it's worth, if you nat draw it. But like you have all these cards that can draw you cards. Inspection Drill. I mean, it makes a lot of sense, in my opinion. It makes plenty of sense why you'd run it. Especially because, like you said, Outrage is really kind of bland. On the Move as a card, I felt a lot stronger about probably like 2 sets ago. I thought it was like too good, and now I've kind of played it, and it's like I think it's really deck dependent on where I want it. I mean, at a lot of times it can be just a +1 if you use it against an MP power, for example. But like
Hmm.
especially if you have a deck that's going to be ending combat, like or yours. Not to mention you could gain stages on the defensive to help use like your dashing sword or your
Yep.
elbow drop or your chest blast, whatever. I think it's more than viable in this deck. I think it works. I think it's a great choice. So
Um, so then I guess moving on to the sword dodge. So I'm honestly not a huge fan of sword dodge. But in this particular deck, it has a little bit more utility than what it normally would.
mhm.
Mainly because what I found myself doing is, there's not always going to be a card that I want to grab with sword drill. Um, but the nice thing is, because of the window, the timing, you can sword drill, and if you're playing against a deck that's not throwing a lot of physical attacks, or if you feel like you're going to end combat or something, you can grab sword dodge and then just use it as mastery fodder. It also allows you to kind of do some more hand filtering and some more drawing. Um, I've tried a couple of different blocks physicals in here. I mean, I always find it a delicate balance between, you know, the endurance blocks, blocking hand, sword dodge, even the newer more there's a
Avoidance,
block that yeah,
the one that gives you the discard effect.
yeah, there's that one. And I think actually when I built this deck that card may have not been out, so that might would be another card to consider. Um
I mean, I'll say this with sword dodge: you can go grab your sword stance with it for next turn. It does give the combo potential, and also if you're against an aggro deck, I mean, it's nice being able to go grab it against another aggro deck.
right.
So,
Yeah, you can even chain them. If I'm oh no, it's an attack card, so no, you can't chain them. That's right. But
oh, it is attack card. Just kidding. You can't grab sword stance. Okay, never mind.
yeah, but the other card I was
Uh,
really that I consider is obviously the um oh my goodness, the name is going to escape me at the moment, but the skipping physical block,
reverse catch.
reverse catch.
Yeah,
Yes, it's got endurance, it synergizes really nice. Um, so that might be a better option. It's just hard for me to give up the consistency that this brings, but the other one has endurance. It gets me a skip. So sword dodge is probably a little overkill on the drawing power, but that's what I've been rocking with for a while. So it's also nice, like you said, like even though you can't chain the sword dodges, you know, being able to go get it with aggressive sword drill when I know I'm against an aggro deck is pretty nice also.
yeah, for
So
sure.
there's that.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
So then I've got the forceful stop, and I'm notably lower on energy blocks in this deck. It's mainly because I feel like if I'm not getting blown out, I'm probably keeping them pretty low on stages. Between the stage loss, the damage, the skips. But this card is really nice because it has some anger hate on it, and then because you want to rush to your higher levels, this can and the mod is on all of your attacks. It really can set up some really nice things. If you're on 4 and you have this card and you block an energy, next thing you know, like every attack you throw is doing a minimum 9.
Yeah,
So it can get really crazy, but um, I just I found that I don't typically level through anger very often in this deck because there's just not enough of it with especially with all the anger hate in the game. So I kind of forwent the anger gaining blocks. This is another one where if you were like, hey, I'd rather play energy release, I wouldn't fight anybody on that one. It's just kind of my personal preference. I like the mod.
That's fair. No, I like it. I mean, if you're not really wanting the energy blocks as is, you might as well, if I draw it and I need to use it, it might as well be a good effect that helps my deck all the time, which you're trying to push stage beats. So it makes plenty of sense, especially. So, of course, time.
And yeah, we got time. Everybody knows time. And then I will say about the aggressive sword. The reason I run 3 is because this deck is very light on dead cards. But you also have a lot of options to dump cards. So I draw 3 or I run 3 so I can see it a lot, especially because we're leveling. There's a lot of times where you can level and then get an aggressive sword drill right back into play. But also if it ever ends up in your hand when you don't want it, there's a lot of ways you can just dump it out with oppressive mastery or some other effects. So it's good to have 3 to get it the consistency of seeing it. And if you end up with it, you have a lot of ways to get rid of it.
For sure. And
Um,
then, of course, you got the tactical drill.
yeah, the Saiyan inspection.
Or sorry, inspection drill. Inspection
So
drill.
this card is huge, absolutely huge in this deck. Um, I know a lot of oppressive decks run this card. Obviously, it has great synergy there, but combining it with being able to dig for this card, with your scrying ability, it just gets ridiculous because essentially you enter combat and look at your top 4 and you find this card in those top 4, it turns into draw 2 of those top 4. Um, I guess one more of those, if I'm thinking about it right.
You're it thins for one. It thins your deck out quicker, so you get into the stuff you want better. But yeah, you're getting to kick it out, get a card, plus you get to draw a random card. So you're getting
Well,
your
it would yeah, but it wouldn't be random though, is what I'm getting at, because you get to scry it.
well, oh sorry, not random. Sorry, you're so if you're entering combat, or sorry, you're getting entered on and you draw it. I'm thinking if you get entered on and you draw it, right? You see it in your top 4, you put it on top, you master it, you discard it, you draw a card, and then you draw 3. So you get all the cards that you saw plus a new one.
Right. Yeah. If
Yeah.
you get
Sorry.
entered on, yeah.
Yeah,
No. I get what you're saying.
but if you're entering, it obviously lets you get 2 cards. So, or
Yeah.
you know,
And so there's a lot of ways. So this is where you kind of see what kind of comes out of the deck that makes it really, that I feel like really makes it excel, is you get to dig for this card a lot. If you're on 1 or 2, you get to search for the top 4, but when you're on 3, you get to look at 6, and then you're gonna guaranteed draw one of those. And then there's a good chance you find one of these. I guess is kind of what I'm getting at, because if you really think about it, on your own turn, you're getting to see 7 cards. The 3 that you draw, and then the 4 that you scry. So when you're looking at 7 cards a turn, or if you're on, level 3, you're looking at 9 cards a turn. Um, there's a good chance this is going to be in there. And then not only is it in there, but you know exactly what you're going to draw off of its discard effect.
yeah,
So it can really set up some chain reactions. Because I've had plenty of times where I end up on level 3 with the sword drill. And so you enter and you get a card with sword drill, and then you look at your, 6, and then, you find this, and then you pitch it, and one of the cards you draw, you set up a chest blast, and then you set up the card you're going to draw from that, and next thing you know, you're entering combat with 7 cards, and then you have chest blast.
yeah,
And it can get out of hand really, really quick. Um, so that's where the deck really comes alive at level 3, because essentially you just have so much control over what goes into your hand, that it's just really, really nice. And the potential to find inspection drill or chest blast and combo them into other cards, or even dashing punch. You're gonna see. I guess what I'm trying to get at is you're gonna see something
that you want to
um,
see.
that you want to see, and then it can be really hard to deal with for the other person. And that's another reason I'm kind of light on the blocks. I mean, aggro decks are historically kind of light on blocks anyways, but I can usually find one in all the digging I'm doing. Um, so it's pretty nice. And then the real nice thing is if you're sitting on 3 with your sword drill out and you use sword drill to go grab sword stance, and then you do your level 3 and draw all your cards, and then sword stance and go up to 4, and you're sitting there with a 7 card hand and a +5 mod on everything.
Yeah, especially with all the skipping going on. I mean, it's cool. I like it. I think it's chock full of a lot of really cool synergies. Seems like I said, all the cards that aren't normal picks, like the charge kick, for example, and even the assisted to an extent, they all have really good direct synergy with the stack and what the deck is trying to do. Oh, you're still there?
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. No, I think it's I like I said, like you've done a really good job of you're very thorough, and you've done a very good job explaining why every card's in here. And I really don't have I think I made a couple comments, but like every one of those cards that I suggested, I was like, oh, why is that not in there? Just to ask, because it's like, okay, what? And it's like, well, everything in here, it like looks like it just does a good job of what it's doing. It does exactly what it needs to.
I enjoy playing it a lot. I definitely think there's some tweaks that would need to be made if it was going to be a tournament worthy deck. I mean, and I'm not going to tell anybody like, oh, this deck is tier 1 or anywhere close to that, but I do think it's fairly good, especially for people would normally consider the premier stack trunks like just absolute garbage. But I feel like this is not garbage. I think it's a pretty solid deck. You know, but I will say weakness. I think you were going to ask me about kind of the weaknesses. One of the biggest ones I noticed is the endurance count is very low. And you don't really care about getting crit, but between all the cards you draw and the low endurance, if you're not taking off and finishing people off, you're gonna lose the battle of attrition. There's not much rejuve. There's not much endurance, and you kind of burn through your deck. Um, I don't know if anybody ever played the original Pokemon card game back when it first came out. I haven't messed with it in years, but the original Pokemon game kind of had a similar deck. It was the Haymaker, and I always played that deck back then. So it kind of reminds me of that, where it's a get in and hit them quick deck, and if the game goes too long, you're probably in trouble.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that you have a whole 5 cards that you could actually like banish for endurance that have any endurance. I mean, the Tracking Blast has got 0 endurance, but yeah, it's
Yeah.
very much dedicated to just popping off. And like, but that's the thing though. That's what I actually really like about this trunk stack is it's not meant to kill you in like the first combat. It's meant to go, okay, I'm getting everything set, and now I'm on that level 3. I'm gonna use, or I'm on the level 2 to set you up to go to 3 to like go to 4, or go to 3 to 4 in a combat and kill somebody because you just stacked your hand. And with Oppressive, the good part about Oppressive being that you could just sit there and you can skip, smack them with 3-4 attacks, then end the combat if you need to. And you've had all this time to build up this hand. So I think like I feel like adding cards just to have endurance in the deck. What's the point? Because you're ultimately, if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, it won't endurance won't matter for you. You know, it's
Right.
kind of like the same thing with the anti-anger. It's like, if I get hit, I get hit. If they anger, they. You know, it's like I'm just gonna just smack them with a bunch of stuff where they can't react to it. You know, so
Yeah, so I definitely feel like those are the things that's really going to struggle against though is anger, dedicated anger decks. I feel like you hit people enough and lock them out of actions enough that I'm not too worried about like a slime anger or like a hybrid anger deck, but dedicated MPPV might be kind of tough, especially Ascension because I want to end combat a lot, so that might work out in their favor more.
yeah,
And then of course we're also lacking on crits. I would say the biggest weakness of this deck is probably an ally deck. We don't really have any way to kill off allies, uh, and they can soak so much damage.
yeah,
It's
that's
going to be
true.
really hard to get through.
That's another card.
Um,
No spin kick.
yeah, so I was just about to say that actually, that maybe spin kick would be a good add.
Anti-anger and
Yeah,
anti-ally and endurance.
yep,
It's
it would probably be a good fit. Maybe drop in the charge kicks or the elbow drops
hmm.
for for a play set of spin kicks would be pretty good because that could be pretty devastating if you get rid of the ally and they skip and you gain 2 anger pretty quick.
Yeah.
So
I don't know. I mean, chest blast and assisted, especially if you're on 4 with both of those cards, could maybe do the trick. But yeah, no, definitely something like a Brohan could be really annoying if he's getting like Chi-Chi Icarus out right off the bat.
yeah.
But yeah, I was gonna say what. I mean, we talk about weaknesses. I guess I feel like does this deck feel like it has any strong matchups particularly? Is it just kind of like, hey, I'm gonna do my game plan and just kill you, and that's how it works?
I feel like it's really good against other aggro matchups um, because a lot of times you're leveling when entering combat, so your stages are maxed out. Um, you've got a lot of ways to get out of combat. The biggest thing I would say about this deck is you have a lot of control over when combats happen and how long they last. Which I guess is kind of true of any oppressive deck, but or maybe an ascension deck. Um, but the biggest thing is because of how many cards I get to look at, I can make that more consistent.
Yeah,
Um, so a lot of times combat is going to be on my terms. And also there's a lot of times where somebody's going to enter on you, and maybe you tank a hit, and then you're going to hit your level with an unleashed or something, and or maybe you have the leveling in your hand for next turn, and you throw a couple of attacks and get them locked, and then get out of combat, and then you're entering on them, and they're locked, and you're going up. So that, I've seen that happen a couple of times. I feel like surprisingly, I thought that I would have trouble when I built this deck with decks like combative or like some of the more like heavier drill decks. But actually, it has a pretty good matchup against those decks, just because of the volume of attacks that you play, and a lot of times they don't really have a lot of ways to stop what you're doing. Um, so that I've played this against a lot of combative, and it's been pretty good.
hmm.
Um, combative can soak a lot of damage, but uh, once you get to 4, nobody can really soak that damage. So
Yeah. No, I always think about cool ways to either use the to both of his early stacks. Because you were talking about you played Trunks in the early sets, and I did make this comment, and I forgot to kind of butt in and make it, but I really liked Empowered Trunks for like sets like 1 through 4. It was a fun deck. It was really cool because he had the high AT like you're saying, and then it was like actually possible to hit this level 4 where you're just dropping 5 on everything like, and you're an F. I mean, he's got really, really, really good AT on that level 4. Like he's in F and E almost the entire level, on top of doing
yeah,
plus
it,
5.
it it is really nice, and that is what I played. I played um, Saiyan Empowered Trunks in tournament until basically set 5 came out. And I had a lot of good success with it. Back then I would rock Sand Domination a lot because you'd
Oh
have the
yeah,
higher power level, but and I had that card in this deck originally, but it just became too inconsistent.
yeah. That card in general,
Because
I think, is just too inconsistent given how power levels have gone,
and you
and
have to pay before the effect goes live, so a lot of
exactly.
times by the time you pay 2 stages, you're not going to be higher level anymore.
Yeah,
Um,
but
and I don't think it's worth running the attach card um, just
Discovery.
for that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no. Hmm. Well, what would you like to see come out to help this deck going forward?
When you said that at the beginning, I was kind of starting to kind of think about it. It's hard for me to say. What I would really like is I would like to see some more flat stage damage. Um, there's not a lot of it in the card pool for Saiyan, and the ones that are not super great. And I,
Yeah,
I know why that is because it's because of clinch. Um, But what I would, but maybe a heroes only, or something so that clinch can't abuse. Well, I mean, I don't know how much of a problem it would be now that clinch is limit 1, but I think flat damage would be nice because Trunks doesn't have the highest AT anymore. But being able to hit somebody with a 7 stage right off the bat, this is like 7 stages and you skip. That could be really nice. Um,
I wouldn't mind some
so
more. I've kind of had a similar thought about that. I wouldn't mind some more flat stage ones. One thing from doing some playtesting and playing against other people is that there's that Sane Punishing Blow that came out in the last set. It's a 6
yeah,
stage Razor Anger one. But instead of just using only in clench decks, Henry Johnson and I played a game where he had a full Vengeance Broly that rocked that card, and I'm like, oh, why are you running that card? You're not clenched. He said, well, it's 6 stages right off the bat, turns into 8, 9, 10 as I go up, and it's got endurance and it gives anger. Like, it's actually really good just because of the fact that it's 6 stage base with anger.
yeah. I've actually been slotting that card into a lot of my Saiyan physical decks just for that reason. I mean, I think maybe it distracts people from how good the card actually is, just because
They see
you don't.
clench.
Yeah, but I mean, a 6 stage 2 endurance, Raise Your Anger 1 is pretty good.
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of the old saying cross punch from the score
Oh,
days.
plus 10 if you declared a Toki.
Yeah, yeah. I
Oh,
mean,
that
we're not
card
going
is
to see
well.
anything like that, but it there's a lot. There's also a lot of mods. So it kind of gets there. There's some other ones. There's the Saiyan uppercut, but that only does 5, and it does 7 if you have the higher power level. But I would be running the flat stage attacks because I don't have the higher power level.
Yeah.
So I would like to see that.
Well, the
Another
idea,
thing that
I mean, I guess I'll say this in favor of those cards, Oppressive letting you throw multiple attacks to get them low enough. The problem is with like Sane Domination though, is like you want to leave that card in case they have time or an event
yeah,
block. So, but as far as like
exactly.
uppercut goes, for example, or some of those other ones, I've been wanting to make those cards viable. I would love to see maybe a Sane Mastery that just outright says that you're stronger, or some more Sane attached cards that have a similar effect would be kind of nice. I'd love to see just a Master that says you're higher though, so that those cards could be viable in some
Yeah,
sense.
that's what I was kind of hoping. I'm not a fan of the way Enhanced Mastery ended up being played, but I was kind of hoping that it was going to have some synergy with some of those old cards that would say, you could destroy a card to get extra damage.
Same here. Well,
But
that's what I thought. Oppressive initially was going to do that whole thing. It was like you destroyed your top to like draw
yeah,
and do stuff, and then they changed it like 3 times to where it is now. But you know,
yeah. So yeah, I'd like to see another flat damage. I mean, yeah, I mean, Punishing Blow. The only thing about Punishing Blow is I don't feel like it's necessarily going to take a spot
yeah,
into this deck, but
doesn't do enough
um,
for
yeah.
you.
And then I guess another thing I would like to see, and this is just something I'd like to see in general, but I've been saying this for a long time, is I'd like to see a card that cancels a floating effect. Um,
Well, you could.
uh,
Oh, go ahead.
that's my like absolute dream card, and I know you have like you could put suppressive strike in here to get
Yeah,
around time,
I
but
was gonna say
I'm
that.
I'm not I'm not too worried about oppressive strike, or I mean I'm sorry,
Time.
I'm not too worried about time because a lot of times I can bait the time and then end the combat. Um, but I'd like to see a card that my my most hated card um, until Combative Mastery came out was Defensive Burst. Um, so I would just like to see even if it was a freestyled card, like a card that says like cancel a floating effect of your choice or something like that. I think that would be really cool, but I don't know how broken that would be.
I don't want that. That sounds too good. That just sounds like such an ass ache of a card to try to balance around to make fair. Like it would have to,
Yeah,
even if it only did that, it would be like it'd be such a weird hit and miss card. It'd be so busted, but simultaneously useless. So I don't know. Maybe it's actually maybe it's actually makeable as long as we don't have a side deck or something. But I don't know.
yeah. I know everybody hates GT, but I remember that there's a card in the GT card pool called say an overhead pound that essentially does that.
Mm.
it doesn't cancel all floating effects, but it cancels any floating effects that stop your attacks,
Hmm.
or so kind of get the idea from that. But I don't know. I mean, if you have any ideas of something you think would be a neat add, like as far as like a new card, I it's hard for me to come up with something I think would be a good fit in here without kind of like pigeonholing it into this exact strategy. Because that's just kind of how my mind works. Is I want to make a card that makes this deck absolutely busted. But if you have any ideas of something, I would love to hear it. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I I don't know what I guess there's nothing really particular. I feel like there's enough in the card pool that you accordingly, if you want to tech the deck, you have the options already. I think there's enough there personally. And then you already have the +5 mod coming on 4. You have the ability to skip to keep your and gain status to keep your AT up, to drop people's AT. I mean, like you said, he's not the highest, so he doesn't have the beats potential until he really gets to like I'd say like 3-4. But then again, I don't think like that. I think the way this stack has always worked has been I'm priming my hand to set myself up for that big combat where I go 3-4. And I think this deck really does a great from just the on the paper because I never played against it. On paper, this thing looks like it does exactly that. It has all the range to just play with everything on top of your deck super well, to stack it properly, to chain together to draw, so that way you don't have to necessarily fight between card spots of what's going to go in your hand because you can just go play the card to draw the extra card anyway. Um, I love this deck. I think this is super cool. I think has so much great synergy to it, and I mean, there's a couple cards that maybe would come out, but I don't necessarily think there's anything directly that I could personally say that I would add to it, as far as direct support goes. But I think the thing I most agree with maybe is like a flat stage attack that maybe has like a good effect would be cool because then you don't have to worry about having AT. But even then, it's like oppressive mastery kind of helps you make up for that.
Yeah, it
So.
does. I guess in my mind, I'm thinking, it'd be nice to be able to throw that first,
Mm.
to knock their AT down. So then mine was, because a lot of my attacks are, AT dependent, and maybe the first attack or two you play, if you're not on 4,
Is
is not really gonna do that much.
Yeah, it's gonna be like
Uh,
3 stages or something. And you're like, okay,
yeah,
this is cool. Like, but no, I mean, and that's totally fair. I wouldn't mind. I wouldn't mind per se seeing something like that, some more flat stuff to just maybe help the weaker ATMPs out. But
yeah, and like I said, if they're worried about clinch, there's not a lot of great heroes only Saiyan cards. Um,
yeah,
I mean,
prepped ball's the
there's
one.
yeah, and prepped ball. I feel like prep ball has some really nice niche use. I can't talk.
Niche uses.
Yes, but I don't know. It's a card that a lot of times I put into a deck and then end up
Taking
cutting
it.
it. Yeah.
I did too. I back when overwhelming power, like again, we're gonna go back to the whole AT thing though. It's like overwhelming power. I used to always love to splash prep ball overwhelming power to decks for the free crit. Now it's like I just overwhelming power is kind of dead if I ever draw it. Outrage, it's like it's gotten outclassed for the most part by like knee clash and on the move for me as far as running. So it's just kind
Yeah.
of it's stuff like that. But that's like I kind of like the deck choices though. There's still decks that use that and it works totally fine. So, but well, yeah, I like I said, I guess I've really read this. I like this. I really appreciate that you reached out to me to present this deck. This is such a cool deck.
Well, I really appreciate you covering it for me. It's like I said, I'm not gonna sit here and try to tell anybody this is a amazing deck, but it's really fun. I've been trying to play more fun stuff. The last couple sets. It's hard for me to make tournaments with the time commitment, but I would probably take this and play it in a tournament. But I like to play weird stuff. So that's kind of my. I would rather play something that's really unique and maybe make a few waves with it than play something that's meta and win. Um, it's just kind of how that's where I find the most enjoyment in the game. So, um, I try to always come up with something crazy or wild. And I was thinking nobody expects a Premier Trunks stack. Um, so
No, I love this thing. But well, guys, if you got anybody else wants to reach out to me and wants to showcase a deck on Build BeautieZ, by all means, hit me up. I will hopefully be doing a set review video as well as some more Build BeautieZ as Dragon Ball Super gets more and more revealed. Ideally, I'm quite certain Joey will probably send me another preview or two. We've only really just started breaking into the preview season, so stick around for all that stuff. But I hope you guys are getting out there playing. Nate, thank you again for coming on here. I really appreciate it.
well, thanks, man. I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. Alrighty, guys, take it easy. Peace.